Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Joseph Biondo Jr., CEO of Biondo Investment Advisors, to discuss how diversified long-term financial plans can overcome periods of intense volatility. Joseph, it's great to have you with us. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thanks for having me, Jill.
You got it. And let's start with the current backdrop. Where are we with the economy and markets right now as we're heading through the end of the year?
So the markets so far this year, to us have been very interesting. I think stronger than most of us expected, coming on the heels of what happened in 2020. But you're seeing a very different complexion this year, more so the cyclical, value-oriented, banks and energy stocks have been performing very well as of late. And last year it was really driven by sort of the reopening and technology, and so you're seeing a very different complexion right now.
How well do you think the market can digest tapering sooner than expected, or if the pace of reduction is faster than expected?
Yeah, so I think that the Fed's done a pretty good job of signaling what their intentions are, and that is to taper at some point later this year. We're in October, so November is probably the right time frame. If it happens sooner or happens at a greater magnitude than I think the investors are anticipating, you could see some increased volatility.
Right. And what about policy out of Washington? We still have to get all these packages passed at some point.
Yeah, that wrangling is interesting right now. I think it always is very short-term interesting, to market participants. It's how the sausage is made in Washington, D.C. is generally out in the public and in the newspapers and on TV. So, but I think some of the impacts of the policy that they're talking about, most I think particularly taxation, is probably going to have the strongest effect on markets.
And we've seen stocks react positively to financial and some healthcare earnings, but I think the real tell is going to be when we get to tech and consumer earnings as it relates to margin compression and supply chain constraints. What are your thoughts around earnings right now?
Yeah, so I mean, in that space in particular, even in August and September, we did get some signaling. Supply chain constraints are impacting margins. I think higher energy prices are impacting margins for more of the consumer discretionary names. I think that's going to persist for a while because the inflation in the energy space does not seem to be tapering off. It seems to be getting more intense, and I think that is likely to continue.
Right. So Joseph, when we put all this together, how can diversified long-term financial plans help to overcome these periods of intense volatility?
So from an equity perspective, we here at Biondo manage both growth-oriented portfolios and more value dividend-paying portfolios. I think having exposure to both of that and getting that sort of mix, the balance between those two types of equity investments makes sense for most investors over the long term. And then balancing in, depending on the client's needs, objectives, age, et cetera, balancing in some fixed income and keeping things on a relatively even keel where you're really focused on what their needs are and what their risk tolerances are. And that really, for us, has been the best governor to making bad financial decisions for our clients, on our clients' behalf, and letting things, sort of work their way through over time.
All right, Joseph, we appreciate the insight. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.